Before Andromeda became one of the most beloved constellations in the sky, she was a princess condemned for a crime she did not commit. Her story begins with innocence, with beauty not yet burdened by glory, with a life shaped by the pride of others. She was the daughter of Cepheus and Cassiopeia. She was born into royalty, but royalty could not protect her. For when her mother's boast angered the sea, the punishment did not fall upon the guilty alone. It fell upon the child. And so Andromeda's legend would become a story of innocence in danger, of terror beside the waves, and of the moment when hope descended from the sky. Andromeda was born into the royal house of Cepheus. Her mother was Cassiopeia. Her father was king. The Greeks placed their kingdom in Ethiopia, by the sea and under a wide foreign sky. To be born royal is to be surrounded by ceremony. It is also to stand close to the consequences of power. Andromeda was young. She was noble. She was admired for her beauty. But in the stories that carry her name, her deepest quality is not pride. It is endurance. Before suffering came, she lived within the rhythms of courtly life. She knew halls of stone. She knew sea winds at dusk. She knew the language of obedience, honor, and expectation. Yet she could not know how quickly such a life could change. For disaster often begins beyond the person who must bear it. Cassiopeia's boast passed into myth because it awakened divine anger. In some tellings, she declared that she herself was more beautiful than the Nereids. In others, she claimed that Andromeda surpassed them. Either way, the praise of mortal beauty was raised above the daughters of the sea. Andromeda stands close to this moment in memory. Sometimes she is the subject of the boast. Sometimes she is only its shadow. In neither version is she truly guilty. That is what makes the story ache. A daughter may be praised without asking for it. She may be compared without consent. Yet in the world of myth, innocence does not always shield a person from the words spoken around her. The sea heard. The Nereids heard. Poseidon heard. And once the sea god's attention turned toward the royal house, Andromeda's fate began to change. The punishment did not begin with explanation. It began with disturbance. Waves rose. Storms struck. The sea turned violent against the land. Ships were lost. Coasts were ravaged. The kingdom felt the change before it understood the cause. Andromeda watched as all around her fear began to grow. A princess in a doomed kingdom is still only a witness at first. She sees the faces of servants. She hears urgent whispers in corridors. She notices that music grows quiet. She notices that prayer grows louder. The world of the palace began to contract around unease. Andromeda did not yet know that the widening storm would soon narrow itself to one terrible point: to her own life. Then came Cetus, the sea monster sent as punishment. In Greek memory, Cetus is more than an animal. It is fear given shape. a force of divine judgment moving through flesh and scale. The coasts could not withstand it. The people cried out in terror. The king's power was useless against it. Andromeda would have heard its name long before she saw it. Cetus. A word that spread like cold through the kingdom. A word carrying hunger, ruin, and the end of safety. When a monster comes from myth into the life of a kingdom, ordinary decisions begin to fail. That is when rulers turn to prophecy. That is when oracles are sought. That is when the innocent become vulnerable. Andromeda's story was now moving toward the question that would decide her fate. What price would calm the sea? The oracle did not soften the truth. It named the price clearly. If the kingdom wished to be saved, Andromeda must be offered to the monster. The child would pay for the pride of the mother. That is one of the harshest patterns in Greek myth. The guilt of rulers falls upon the innocent. Andromeda did not rage. At least the old stories do not preserve rage. Instead, they preserve the shape of a sentence. A life taken and given over by fear, duty, and divine demand. Her father broke beneath the burden. Her mother faced the living result of her vanity. And Andromeda, though innocent, became the center of the kingdom's desperate hope. Save the land. Offer the daughter. The sentence of the oracle entered the royal house and changed every silence within it. There are many heroes in Greek myth who raise weapons and resist. Andromeda's courage is different. It belongs to stillness, to endurance, to the carrying of fear without the power to change the command placed upon her. She was a princess. She had been taught duty. She had been taught that the house of the king stands before the lives within it. But teachings feel different when they step towards sacrifice. What did she think as the hours passed? Did she hope the oracle might be wrong? Did she wish to run? Did she feel anger toward her mother? The myths do not always say. But their silence makes room for human truth. Fear was there. Sorrow was there. And yet Andromeda moved toward what awaited her. Not because she was unafraid. Because there was no escape left to her within the world she had been born into. The day came when Andromeda was led from the palace. A royal daughter walked not toward marriage, not toward festival, but toward sacrifice. The contrast gives the scene its power. She had once been adorned for life within the court. Now she was prepared for death before the sea. Attendants wept. The people watched. The royal house, which should have protected her, now delivered her to the shore. In this moment Andromeda becomes more than a princess. She becomes an image. The innocent led outward. The beloved handed over. The one who bears the cost of another's words. Such images endure because they are simple and terrible. No sword is needed. No battle is underway. Only a path. A maiden. A coastline. And the knowledge of what waits ahead. They chained Andromeda to the rock. The sea stretched before her. The wind moved around her. Below, the waves struck the stone. This is one of the most lasting images in all of Greek mythology. The helplessness of it is part of its power. A princess reduced to an offering. Beauty placed beside death. Stillness waiting for violence. The kingdom remained at a distance. Her parents remained behind. No companion stood with her at the final edge. In that loneliness, Andromeda became something more than a royal daughter. She became the shape of innocent suffering itself. And yet the myths do not leave her only in despair. For at the very moment when terror seems absolute, another figure begins to approach. Sometimes hope in Greek myth does not rise from within the victim. It enters from outside, carried by a hero. Perseus was returning from his own great labor. He had slain Medusa. He carried the Gorgon's head hidden within the cabesus. He moved through the world no longer as a youth, but as a hero already shaped by gods and danger. As he passed above the coast, he saw Andromeda chained below. He descended. That descent changes the entire tone of her story. What had been isolation becomes encounter. What had been sentence becomes possibility. Perseus asked what had happened. Andromeda answered. In that exchange, two mythic worlds touched. The journey of the monster slayer met the suffering of the sacrificed princess. And from that meeting came rescue, but not yet certainty. First, the hero had to understand the law of the situation. Then he had to face the powers that had created it. Perseus saw beauty in Andromeda. But the story is not only about beauty. He saw sorrow. He saw innocence under judgment. He saw a life waiting for death because of another person's boast. Andromeda spoke to him of her mother's pride, of Poseidon's wrath, of Cetus, of the oracle's command. To tell one's own doom aloud is a strange kind of courage. Perseus listened. And perhaps, in that moment, Andromeda felt something she had not felt since the oracle first spoke. Not safety, but recognition. A witness who did not stand far away. A man who had stepped near enough to hear her. Many legends remember this first conversation as the birth of love. Even if love came later, compassion came first. And compassion is often the first form of rescue. Perseus did not act without speaking to the royal house. He went to Cepheus and Cassiopeia. He offered a bargain. If he saved Andromeda, would she be given to him in marriage? Cepheus agreed. Desperation makes promises quickly. Cassiopeia stood within that agreement as well, though her silence could not erase the chain of guilt that had brought them here. Andromeda's future, once guided by fear and sacrifice, now turned upon the courage of a stranger. Yet the bargain also reveals something painful. Her life remained something others decided. First the oracle decided it. Then the kingdom accepted it. Now a hero negotiated its rescue. Andromeda herself stood at the center, but not in command. That too is part of why her story feels tragic, even when it turns toward hope. Rescue had been promised, but the monster had not yet come. Andromeda remained at the rock. The sea darkened before her. Sometimes the longest moment in a story is not the battle itself. It is the waiting. She had heard Perseus speak. She had seen him descend from the sky. She may have believed. She may have doubted. Hope is difficult when one has already been prepared for death. Yet now two futures stood before her. In one, Cetus would rise and devour her. In the other, the impossible would happen. A hero would prevail over divine punishment. The sea moved. The air changed. Andromeda waited between terror and miracle, unable to move toward either. At last Cetus rose from the deep. Its coming broke the sea into violence. It towered above the waves like a living judgment. For Andromeda, this was the face of death made visible. No longer prophecy. No longer rumor. No longer distant fear. The monster had come for her. What would courage mean in such a moment? Not attack. Not triumph. Simply remaining. Simply enduring the sight of doom while bound and unable to flee. Few heroes in myth are asked for that kind of strength. Andromeda was. The shore trembled. The kingdom watched from afar. And above the terror, Perseus prepared to strike. The next moments would decide not only her survival, but the memory of her name for centuries to come. Perseus met the monster with courage worthy of song. Some tellings say he attacked from the air with sword in hand. Others say he used the head of Medusa. Each tradition preserves the same truth. He stood between Andromeda and destruction. The battle churned sea and sky together. Waves burst white. The monster roared. The hero struck. Andromeda watched, still unable to act, yet no longer abandoned. This is important. Rescue is not only the slaying of danger. It is the end of abandonment. At last Cetus fell. The waters settled around its ruin. The sentence hanging over Andromeda was broken. The chain between innocence and punishment had been cut by force, courage, and divine favor. And with the death of the monster, the story turned from terror toward release. Perseus came to Andromeda and freed her. The chains were removed. The stone that had been an altar of death became simply stone again. Such a moment carries quiet after violence. The monster is gone. The sea is calmer. The body, long held in fear, can finally breathe. Andromeda stepped back into life. Not unchanged. No one emerges from a sentence of death unchanged. But alive. That matters. The princess who had been given away by her own people now stood beside the man who had chosen to save her. The contrast between those two acts defines the emotional center of her myth. Abandonment and rescue. Fear and devotion. Sentence and release. And from this release would come not only marriage, but a place in the sky itself. Perseus and Andromeda were joined in marriage. What began in terror now entered celebration. Yet the joy of the moment carries a complexity that makes the myth richer. Andromeda did not return simply to her old life. She passed into a new one. The hero who saved her became her husband. Her rescue became the doorway into another destiny. In some stories, weddings in myth are quickly shadowed by further violence. Phineus appears. Claims are challenged. Blood is shed. But the essential movement remains. Andromeda is no longer the chained maiden of the shore. She becomes a wife, a companion of Perseus, and later the mother of children whose lines continue in heroic tradition. Her story does not end with rescue. It continues into life. That continuation is part of what makes her different from many figures remembered only in tragedy. Even after rescue, memory remains. The sea does not immediately become innocent again. The rock is not forgotten. The monster is not forgotten. Andromeda's suffering gives depth to her later peace. She is not a figure remembered only because she was beautiful. She is remembered because she endured danger without becoming cruel, and because her life was nearly extinguished by the pride of others. That is what lends her story tenderness. She carries survival. She carries the memory of being powerless. And yet she also carries the grace of one who was not destroyed by it. When later generations looked at her among the stars, they remembered not only a princess. They remembered deliverance. They remembered how fragile a life can be, and how sudden salvation may appear. Greek myth rarely leaves powerful stories on earth alone. The heavens gather them. Andromeda was placed among the stars. So too were Perseus, Cassiopeia, and Cepheus. Even Cetus found place in the celestial memory of the tale. This arrangement matters. The myth becomes visible as a whole. The maiden, the rescuer, the proud mother, the anxious father, the monster from the sea. When people looked upward, they could trace the relationships between them. The sky became not only decoration, but structure. Andromeda's story therefore belongs to a larger constellation family. To see her is also to remember those whose actions surrounded her life. In that way, the stars keep her innocence connected to its causes and its deliverance. Among the constellations, Andromeda shines with unusual gentleness. There is no throne tilted in punishment, as with Cassiopeia. There is no monstrous form as with Cetus. There is no triumphant weapon as with Perseus. Instead, there is a long, elegant pattern of stars. A figure remembered through vulnerability and survival. That is fitting. Her strength is not the strength of the sword. It is the strength of being carried through terror without vanishing. This is why her constellation became beloved. It invites feeling as much as admiration. When we see Andromeda in the sky, we remember not only mythic rescue, but the value of the life that was rescued. And that difference matters. She is not just the reason for a hero's glory. She is a life restored. Why does Andromeda endure so strongly in human memory? Because she gathers together several truths at once. The innocent may suffer. The powerful may fail to protect them. Words spoken in pride may wound those who never chose the danger. And yet rescue is possible. Not guaranteed, but possible. Her myth does not teach that virtue prevents sorrow. It teaches that innocence is precious precisely because it can be threatened. Andromeda becomes the image of that threatened innocence. The broken chains at her story's center symbolize more than one release. They release her from death. They release the kingdom from judgment. And they release the story itself into hope. That is why her legend feels luminous even though it begins in dread. When we look at the autumn sky and find Andromeda there, we see more than stars. We see a memory of danger overcome. We see the child of a troubled house who was nearly given to the sea. We see the princess who endured. We see the woman who lived beyond the rock. Her constellation is not only an ornament. It is a remembrance. A quiet statement that innocence may be endangered, but it should still be honored. For Greek myth is often severe. It does not flatter life. It does not promise safety. Yet sometimes, within its severe world, it preserves tenderness. Andromeda is one of those tender preservations. A figure the heavens keep not because she conquered, but because she survived. Andromeda still shines in the night. Her story remains one of the clearest and most moving in all Greek mythology. A royal daughter. A mother's boast. A god's anger. A monster from the deep. A hero descending from the sky. A life restored. And then, at last, a constellation. This is why Andromeda endures. Not only as the rescued maiden of old stories. Not only as the wife of Perseus. But as a symbol of innocence tested by terror and preserved through courage. Her stars remind us that not every great figure in myth is remembered for conquest. Some are remembered because they reveal what must be protected. When Andromeda rises above the horizon, the ancient lesson rises with her. Beauty is fragile. Power is unreliable. Pride is dangerous. But innocence, once saved, can become eternal in the sky.